SoundCloud. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. So far, there are two of you. I'm really happy to have you here. This is Trust the Process, and today we're going to have Dr. Michelle Nirenberg talk to us about a really interesting case that she worked on. I think this was really, it was October, maybe, when this happened?
October, it was a Sunday, October 18th.
Okay, October 18th, 2020. She's going to go through the case. And another thing that she may choose to share with you is a little bit about her full-time work that she does working in corrections and being a counselor in a correctional facility. So we will start with her giving a brief introduction and then going into the case. And then toward the end, if you have questions about the case or questions about being a counselor in a correctional facility, please be sure to go ahead and ask her. This is recorded. I will post the recording in the advising forum under the Trust the Process area, which is with the other student groups. If you have any questions after this, please feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Nirenberg. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Rush Wilson.
You're welcome.
A little bit about myself. I've had actually two lives. I was a deputy sheriff back in the 80s. I started there. I started in a small town local jail, community jail, and then I went on to the road where I was a deputy, and I did undercover narcotics work and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I was in a bad accident and I had to make a decision to do something else. Being a corrections officer, being a law enforcement officer, you're basically, a mental health professional anyway. So I made the leap and I did what I had to do and became a doctor in counseling, education, and supervision. And I've worked in prisons in Georgia and New Jersey as mental health. I guess, I'll go into the case. It was it was really actually kind of interesting. I do have my own practice that I started, and my number is listed on Psychology Today. So apparently, the gentleman that called me, he had spoke to his sister to find him a therapist because he was having not just suicidal but homicidal thoughts as well. So she saw that I had law enforcement experience and things like that and trauma experience, and so she gave him my number, and that's really where 2 days of work started. Generally, the initial phone call is like a half hour at the most. This one literally lasted at least 2 days. At about 5:30, I had gotten a phone call from this gentleman, and I'm going to call him Bob Smith, and he, he's a potential client, so you have to interview him a little bit and see what's going on. He said that his sister, went online, got my number. He said that he was a truck driver and that he was currently in York, Pennsylvania, and that, he identified the kind of truck that he was driving. And he, hauled produce and other kinds of products and stuff like that. He went on to say that he slept during the day and drove during the night, which a lot of truck drivers do. And then it began. He said that he was having, he was hearing voices, and the voices were telling him to kill himself. He was suicidal. I asked him if he had a plan. He did have a plan. He was going to have his truck, he was going to release the brakes and have the truck roll over him. And then he told me that he was also homicidal. And so far so good. I kept asking him, trying to talk to him into going to the hospital so that he could feel safe. But when he said he was homicidal, he also said that he had thoughts of dismantling the individuals. Um, and this is really where my law enforcement experience kicked in. The first thing that popped into my mind was serial killer. Because we have somebody who's homicidal. He wants to dismantle these people. He was a truck driver. Went over multiple states. Um, and the fact that he also claimed that he had road rage real bad, and he also said he was in the Navy, and he had PTSD from the Navy. He said that he does not like people. He was very antisocial. When he would stop for the night to sleep, he would not sleep at truck stops. He would generally sleep in school parking lots because he did not want to be around anybody. Um, and so I started asking him questions so I could kind of identify him, because at that point I was thinking, okay, I've got to notify the police department. um so you know he told me that he was fine, that he was going to deal with the voices. um because I kept on trying to get him to go to the hospital. uh he told me that he was not definitely not going to the hospital. Like I said, he went 3 years and 3.5 years in the Navy, and he went to different countries where there was active fighting. He has PTSD because he took a friend's body and laid it over him to pretend that he was dead, so he would not be shot. Um, uh, he did say that he was married, and like I said, he told me a lot of things about him. He was married. He told me that his height, his weight. He told me his sister's name. He gave me his sister's phone number. He told me his wife's name. He told me his home address. I mean, you know, he was a little skeptical at answering these questions, but I made it so I was extremely interested, and I connected it back to me. Um, when he said that he was a truck driver, I said, my uncle owned a trucking firm, and I asked if he had gone down that way and stuff like that. So he started talking a little bit more openly. He did inform me that he did have weapons. However, he said that he did not have his weapons on him at this time. Um, he explained um, that he didn't really need a firearm to uh, commit a crime, because of his training, he could use his bare hands. He did inform me that uh, at one time in Camden, New Jersey, he murdered somebody. He got into a fight and he murdered them, and he paralyzed another gentleman. Um, so he wasn't real clear as to whether he served prison time in that. And like I said, he had road rage, where he actually stopped a vehicle and beat in the guy's window and drug him out, and beat him up, so to the point where he went to the hospital. So there was violence in his past and stuff like that, which again, worried me quite a bit. That here he is having all these thoughts and sights and hallucinations and stuff like that, and he's not willing to get help. Um, Again, several times I asked him to go to the hospital, and like I said, he just would not. He said that he spent a lot of time on the road, and then he would go home for several days. Um, at some point, I'm not quite sure how I did this, but he wanted treatment 3 days a week, and he insisted that I got paid for it. So he actually gave me his MasterCard number and all that. I really was not comfortable having the MasterCard number and everything, because I didn't want to be accused of spending money on his card. So what I had done was I notified his sister that I did receive the card number and the expiration date and all that information, and I made sure that she understood that I would not be charging anything on his account. Um, the way I looked at it, it was just another form of information that maybe I could provide to the police. Um, I contacted the police department in the town in Pennsylvania where he was at, and I spoke to a dispatcher, and she or he wasn't very interested. I gave him all the information I had, the concerns I had, the importance that this guy be involuntarily placed into a hospital, and I told him why and who I was, and that I was a doctor and all this. Um, this dispatcher was not concerned in the least. He would not take any of the information down. Um, at this time, I kind of like was at a loss. I'm like, all right, so I've got this guy who's suicidal, who's homicidal, who has plans for both. Um, the police department doesn't want to do anything about it. Now what? Um, where do I stand ethically? Where do I stand legally?
So let's
Uh,
let's stop for a second and see, Shawnee, Samantha, any ideas, any questions so far from either of you?
Um, I have some thoughts, like, but I think you would. Were you in the town where you were the sheriff?
no, I was actually. My cat's going to join. I was actually at my home in New Jersey.
Oh, because then I would I would like, if you knew the actual like dispatch supervisor, then you would call into there. But I don't know. I'm just look. I don't know. Like, so okay, so you wasn't at the. I don't know. Okay.
Because keep in mind, and you guys are being trained in telemental health, telebehavioral health as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when it's a Sunday night, you have a new telehealth client, you've not met this person previously, it's your first session, and
Mm-hmm.
these things happen. You have to kind of play around with that, and she'll cover more of this as the case continues. I just wanted to know if thus far either of you has any questions.
Also, it wasn't really a normal telehealth because we didn't get on the computer, so I didn't know what he looked like or anything like that. At this point, it was just a telephone call.
Wait. Oh, okay. I missed that. I thought this was an in-person thing.
Oh no, this is just a telephone call.
No, this person's
Uh,
actively driving the truck while he's talking to her.
Oh.
Well, he's in the truck while he's talking to her.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's different. Okay.
Yeah. So no questions so far? Either one of you?
I guess what I was thinking, where I guess we have to take everybody at their word. But with some of the stuff, do we know that? I guess we have no knowledge if this is true, or do you ever get jokes? You know?
Yes, you do get jokes, but when I spoke to his sister confirmed everything he said.
Okay.
So,
And here's the thing too, and then I'll let you continue, Dr. Nirenberg. Do you really want to be the person who decides whether or not a person is joking or lying, or do you allow the authorities in charge to do that? The thing that's a little bit different about Dr. Nirenberg's experience is she's a former police officer. So she did a couple of things that I would not have thought to do because I don't have that same law enforcement background. So she's got a different way of thinking about it too, which is probably a part of what's going on for her.
No, I really liked how you got the credit card info, because that's a great way of finding out who you're talking to.
and that's what I thought. You know, the credit card information. Maybe the police department can trace that credit card back to the owner. That was one of my thoughts. I mean, the majority of the information I got, I literally backhandedly got by asking. I mean, questions. I mean, some of the questions I asked, I couldn't believe were coming out of my mouth. I was like, okay, well, let's go with this. You know, and a lot of times he would kind of like become skeptical about giving me information, and I knew that was not the way I needed to go, so I went around and to get more information. I mean, he told me, he gave me his sister's number, he gave me his home address. He told me how his wife's name, how many kids he has. I mean, by the end of this whole thing, I knew more about this guy than I knew about myself.
I'm going to let you continue with the case at this point if there are no other questions.
Okay. At about 8:30 that night, and again Sunday night, I called Bob to check on his welfare. Because we had hung up. He said he was feeling better. Talking to me made him feel calmer and stuff like that. And I was so skeptical to hang up on him, but I couldn't stay on the phone with him all night. The other thing was, like I said, where do I stand ethically and legally? And here I am, it's a Sunday night and nobody's open. And they say that these things are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I contacted Dr. Rush Wilson and told her what was going on. And we kind of put our heads together. And that's basically where she came on board. And she was in the background. Do you want to tell them what you were doing?
Yeah, we did a couple of different things. Because we're talking about more than one state, because this person crossed from one state into another state, I didn't know really how to work with that. So we tried calling, or had her call, the counseling board where she lives, the American Counseling Association. She'd already tried to talk to the police. Nothing was working. We weren't having any success. So one of the things that I did was enlisted the support of a couple of people I know who have jobs as directors of clinical training at 3 different universities, and one who worked for ACA, to see if we could come up with some type of solution. And ultimately, while they all were helpful, it was the person who had worked with ACA who gave you the most direct advice, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. She said, I spoke to the doctor, and she suggested that I contact ACA in the morning. Okay. So so basically, I did the next morning, about 12:30. It was about 12:30. Yeah, about 12:30. I contacted ACA Ethical Division, and I explained what I had, and she too. I mean, immediately, the thought process went straight to serial killer. Just because of the background, his age, just his the fact that he traveled over multiple states. I mean, there were just so many flashing, red flags in this. It was crazy. So she stated that I reach out to the sister and see what kind of information I can get from her. And she stressed the importance of doing it immediately. She, was concerned about not just protecting Bob, but protecting people within the community. She suggested that I obtain legal consultation from, my legal agency, the one that I have my insurance through. And again, she stressed and repeated the urgency over and over again. So I hung up with her, and I did. I called the agency that I have my my insurance through, and this lady, she was no help whatsoever, none. I'm trying to explain to her what I have, and she's asking me questions that are so far from anything that I'm trying to talk about. Like I'm like telling her what's going on, and she asks me, were there any injuries? I don't know. She, I asked her, am I legally liable for Bob and what's going on? What steps should I take? She asked me, were there any complaints? About what? Was there any, she says, if there, are there any complaints about negligence? I'm like, negligent for what? You know, so she's like, she's totally in left field, and I'm like trying to get an answer for a specific question. So then she tells me that she's going to file a claim and report to the claims department, and the claims person will call me in 3 days. And I told Dr. Rush Wilson what this person says, and I was like, what is she filing a claim on? There's no complaints. There's no injuries that I know at this point. I'm coming to you. Am I liable? What do I need to do? And got absolutely no answers. So I hung up with absolutely no answers. And I wound up calling Bob's sister. I figured, okay, maybe I'll get more information from her than I did anybody else. And I did have prior permission from Bob to call his sister. He actually said, call my sister if you need any information. Okay, so I did. The jackpot, she gave me his date of birth. Well, now with his date of birth, I could contact the sheriff's department and give the date of birth. They could get the tag number of his truck, and they could go search for him. Okay. They could also pull up his driver's license with his date of birth. They could get a photo ID with his date of birth. So that was like the jackpot information. She, like I said, she also verified everything that he was saying, that he was in the Navy and he did see fighting and he did, these other things did happen. That he had been in the hospital several times before. That there was the situation in where he murdered the one person and paralyzed another, and then the road rage. So she did, she did what I needed. She verified all these things and gave me further information. After speaking with her, I left a message for Bob on his answering machine or his voicemail. And about 5 o'clock that night, I called again, and he had just woken up. Truck drivers generally sleep during the day and drive during the night because of less traffic. But then again, I go to my mindset, and it's also a wonderful time to carry out criminal activity. So I spoke to him. I was speaking to him, and he told me that he did want to kill himself again. He was having suicidal thoughts. He also was having homicidal thoughts again, where he wanted to disassemble individuals, and that's what got me the most. I mean, I can understand suicidal thoughts and plans and stuff like that, and we could work with that. I could handle and work with homicidal thoughts. But when he specifically said he wanted to disassemble people, that's when my mind just went, all over the place. So I wanted to try to pinpoint where Bob was. And he, like I said, he was becoming very skeptical. He didn't trust the government. He told me that the CIA was following him. The government. He tried to get his records from the VA, but the CIA, put a stop to all that. So he was definitely delusional and everything. So I wanted to find out where he was, if he was still in the original location or what. He said no, that he had left, and he was currently in Atlantic City, where he was, his truck was getting loaded up, and he said that he was going to leave about 1 o'clock in the morning to go to Pennsylvania and then back to New Jersey. And I thought, okay, fine, great. It's early. He's leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I have some time to work with. And so I decided, okay, he's in a different place, so I will try the police department in this place, see if I get anywhere with this person. So I called the dispatcher, and she was wonderful. She took down every bit of information I had. She said that she would actively get her officers searching for him, because I wanted to get him involuntary. Since he was in New Jersey at this point, I can involuntarily commit this guy, because that's where I'm licensed. So I spoke to the dispatcher, and she took everything down, made me repeat things, everything. Well, the officers went and actively to locate him, and I was told that they about 7:30. I got a phone call from an officer, Johnson, there, and he said they found Bob, and they were talking to him, and of course, somebody who knows how to play the game, somebody who's been in the hospital before, somebody who's had these experiences before knows how to play the game. So of course he's going to deny everything I said. He denied. Okay, so he said he wasn't suicidal, and he said he wasn't homicidal, and he said he didn't have any guns, and all this stuff. So what they did next was they shouldn't have done it. They should have taken the word of a doctor and just involuntarily commit this gentleman. But what they did was they called out their crisis unit and an ambulance. And the ambulance tried to talk him into going to the hospital. And of course, he said no. The crisis worker spoke to him, and she said, said that, well, he says he's not suicidal. He says he's not homicidal, and he doesn't want to go to the hospital. So there's nothing we can do. The sergeant, let him go. They just let him go. So the officer called me back and told me, he apologized and everything, because he agreed with me. And he agreed that this guy was dangerous and he needed to be hospitalized. But what could he do? Because his sergeant and the crisis intervention individual said no. Now, they should have just immediately followed the advice of, technically not one, but 5 doctors, who have experience in this. So they released Bob, and he continued his trip to Pennsylvania and then back to New Jersey. The next day, I got a phone call from his sister, and she thanked me for everything I did. She understood that I tried, and that I went above and beyond. And, she just didn't know what to do after that. And that's really that case, that one was one for the books. I've honestly, I've never come across anything like that. Have you, Dr. Wilson, Rush Wilson?
I have, no, not quite like that. And then what I'd like to do for all of us too is, let's see, you apologize for asking, there's a comment. Let's see. Let me go through a couple of other things here. Let's look at the case really quickly, and then I'll get back to another point. This is a person who calls in. This is a new client. You are talking to this person because they're telling you they're feeling suicidal and potentially homicidal. They let you know that they have a history of having killed somebody before. They have a history of having maimed someone to the point of paralysis. And they have other legal issues going on. They're in a truck. They're mobile. They're going between states. And they're telling you on some level, I'm kind of looking for somebody else to kill. You are at your home office. It's a Sunday night. You don't really know what to do. And that brings us pretty much to the summary of this case. Additionally, this person has given you permission to talk to a family member. With that, as an investigator, because you have a background in doing this kind of work, you're able to find out some information that a lot of us might not really even think to go over. You had info about this person's height, weight, physical description. You knew about their military history, that this person had access to weapons, that they were an interstate trucker, that a little bit about their family constellation. So you knew that this person was married. You knew that he had siblings. and you knew, like I said already, about some previous history. What I'm wondering about and what I'd like to hear from the two of you, and even from you as well, Dr. Nirenberg, but you already know the outcome of the case. What kind of legal and ethical concerns do you have? What types of concerns do you have for your own safety? What's going on in your mind if you have this type of case?
Well, you definitely have jurisdiction issues because he's going through multiple jurisdictions. Because you had almost like the police mentality, because you were the last person who had contact with him, you have it's almost like you do not want to let him go because you know his mental state, and you know the level of danger he is in for himself and to others. So you really want to try to keep this person on the phone.
Exactly.
So that you can continue to get help to him.
Exactly.
I don't know what year this was.
This was October of 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So at this point, you really want his phone number because depending on which police department and what they have available to you, you can always ping their phone. Get his what route, like if you could get him to say what mile markers he's at, so state police could then go and possibly catch up to him, since the dispatcher didn't respond, you know, them over, never mind. Dispatcher didn't respond properly. So at that point, you kind of want to get around the dispatcher. And a lot of times, if you call in to like the state police, they will take it more seriously because he is going through jurisdictions, and they could always hand it off to the next state.
Right. And let me stop you for just a second. Hi, Gigi. Thank you for joining us. Let me tell you really briefly what we're doing. Dr. Nirenberg's presenting a case. And in this case, and I may have mentioned it a little bit in your doc internship course, she got a new telehealth client. This new client is driving between states. He's in a truck, so it's a phone conversation. And he's basically given her information about his desire to hurt people, hurt himself, and potentially take the lives of other people. And thus far, Dr. Nirenberg, who also is a former police officer, was able to get information about this person's physical description, military history, that he had weapons, he's in a truck, where he generally is, his family constellation, previous legal issues because he has previously killed someone, he's previously hurt someone to the point where they were maimed, and he also had some other legal history. She's called the police. They have not thus far been helpful. And now we're talking about where, as a counselor, as a person who's not in the physical space with this person, thank goodness, what do we do? And so far, Shani was giving us some information about what she thought. That's where you came in. And I'll let it roll from here. We got about 19 more minutes. So what are we doing? What other thoughts do you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I could think of right now, like especially like with identifying like, okay, what color is your cab? What, you have any detailing on your truck to make it easier for people to identify it? But at this point, you kind of have to keep him talking. So at least until you could have someone intervene.
Okay, so
at night, and I know like police officers there's not a lot of people working at night. People think that people working, there's not a lot of officers working at night, so they're thin as well.
So Shawnee, I did get the year, the make, model, color of his truck. That he was an independent trucker. He was not a truck driver for a company, so he was independent, which meant he could go anywhere, anytime. if I would have stayed on the phone with him until help arrived, I literally would have been on the phone with him for 2 days.
Understood.
You know, I mean, as it was, I was on the phone with him for about an hour and 45 minutes, but I couldn't sit still after that. I mean, everything was going through my mind, you know, the safety of him, the safety of others. What can I do? The safety of myself. Because here I am on my cell phone, and I did call him back, and I forgot to do *67. So now he's got my number. Okay. So there was some concern about myself. And he didn't know it, but his home base is probably about 20 minutes from where I live. If that. Actually, no, it's not. It's right over the bridge. So it's okay, about 20 minutes. Yeah, luckily he did not know that. He begged me not to call his wife. He did not want his wife notified at all. Ethically, ethically and legally, it was a giant mess because I couldn't contact anybody on a Sunday night. So how I want to know, how do you feel about, you know, we're open 24 hours a day pretty much. How do you feel about our backup, our assistants going home on Friday after 5 and not coming back until Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning?
Well, that's open to you guys, because I have a couple of things I want to share before we end up wrapping up. So what do you think about that? We have 24-hour hotlines, and that was one of the issues that was raised when she gave me a call. We have 24-hour hotlines that don't operate on Sunday evenings, which is a little strange because we expect, our expectation is that a 24-hour hotline will be open every hour. And in this case, she had 3 different places that weren't available. Additionally, and this is something that I learned October of 2019, I guess it would have been. So October is a really interesting month for ethical issues in this conversation. When you call your liability insurance company, they are concerned about complaints made against you. They are not concerned about somebody doing something to you. So if a client is running down the street trying to stab you with a knife, your liability insurance company does not really have an investment there. But if you were, chasing your client down the street trying to hurt them, then they're invested in that, because their job is to protect things that you may have been accused of doing wrong. So while that is a good place for us to call, I'm not surprised she got the response that she got. I got a very similar response when there was a client who was pursuing me. Because I had not done anything, they weren't so interested. Their thing was, you might want to go back to the ethics board, you might want to go to the police department, but there's nothing we can really do. Right. So that's something we also need to keep in mind. Call them, cover all your bases. Don't be very surprised when their primary investment is in protecting any claims made against you. Besides that, what other things are we thinking about?
His destinations, like what are his stops? Where's he sleeping and resting, so you'll know where he is and where he's projected to going. And like when he drop his load, what time is that supposed to be there, so you can at least have somebody maybe go there and wait for him when he gets to his destination.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking about is, if you've already gone to the police and whatever department that you went to, for whatever reason, didn't follow up, or because if I recall from hearing this story prior, he wasn't caught, correct? He's still free.
Yeah, he's still driving his truck around several different Yeah.
But they did find him. You were able to give
Yes.
them enough information where they did talk to him, but no, there was no, he was not
Right.
detained.
So the thing that, I to me, as a
Mhm.
therapist, first and foremost, before I'm a therapist, I am a person.
Mhm.
And we are trained to help people with trauma. I can't imagine that this is not traumatizing um, for you. So the thing that sits the most with me is self-care.
Mhm.
One, what are you doing to take care? And it's Dr. Nirenberg, did I pronounce that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. How are you taking care of yourself? That's the thing that came into my mind. The other thing is, because this man is still loose, have you considered, because what I've learned as a rule of thumb, having family members in law enforcement, and dear friends very close to me in law enforcement, we sometimes sit down and have these conversations about my work in mental health and a client, and then they're discussing, things that they're dealing with in the streets. And it
Mhm.
always ends up coming back to some issues with mental illness. So what I'm wondering is, have you possibly, because now I'm, as a therapist, thinking about your safety,
Mhm.
thought about going to another precinct, because oftentimes, sometimes certain precincts aren't as aggressive or
Mhm.
don't take things as concerning as others. So
Okay.
have you possibly considered escalating by going to another police department? Because if we have hard proof, and I'm not saying, we are law enforcement, but this kind of moves beyond, for me, the clinical piece. This is now, to me, a safety issue for you, especially if he has your phone number, because if he has your phone number, there's plenty tracking devices, especially if your phone number is sent to your home address. He has access to you. So are you escalating for sake of your safety, is one of the things that I'm thinking about. And then when I think about code of ethics or the hotline not being available, I mean, it's almost like it is what it is. We could advocate, we can contact ACA, we can write into ACA as professionals, and or even, our insurance, and request, more safety on our behalf. But we know that rule and regulation doesn't change overnight. So that's going to take time. So I'm thinking first things first, and first and foremost is your safety and your mental health.
So what, before you
Um,
even answer, Dr. Nirenberg, one of
okay.
the things I'm taking away from your comments, Gigi, and also too from your comments, Shani, is that there's a level of concern that you have when this person has access to you potentially, and you don't really know what's going on. So you're also concerned about not only protecting the public, but protecting yourself. One of the things that APA, one of the little acronyms I learned when I was studying for my psych license, is they talked about the triple Ps, and you are studying protecting the profession, the professional, and the person. So they're talking about the public, which is another P they could have used. They're talking about the clinician and the actual client. We're protecting multiple levels of people, and sometimes there's a conflict between protecting this person who is the client and protecting me or the public when the client is trying to attack one of these other two potentially. There's a lot going on for her. So, Dr.
Uh,
Nirenberg, how do you respond to that? What about your own self-care?
yeah, as you know, um, I was in law enforcement for, oh God, 10 years, every bit of 10 years.
Mhm.
So I had the training of a law enforcement officer. I have the mentality of a law enforcement officer. Um, and a lot of times that gets in the way. It's like a battle within myself between my mentality as a law enforcement officer and my mentality as a therapist.
Okay.
Um, I have nothing but the utmost respect and love for Dr. Rush Wilson.
Oh, thanks.
We've known each other for, good God, 14 years.
Mhm.
And
I was on her dissertation committee.
yes, yes. And so going to her with this was one step to, yeah, and we've talked about it since then. And it was a way for me to um take care of myself, just to get it out. You know,
And
we'd
also,
laugh.
let me stop you for a second too. And we also have to think about taking care of ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic, and
Right.
that she works as a counselor in a correctional facility. So there's
Right.
so many different places, like you mentioned, Gigi, where self-care could be neglected easily just based on how her life is structured.
Right. So, you know, so in my mind, you know, and because of my training, my safety came last. The safety of the public and the safety of the individual came before my safety. I know Dr. Rush Wilson does not agree with that, but that's the way I mean, that's, you know, 10 years of training, that's, you know, you stripped of everything and then they rebuild you. And that's what you think. So, you know, you do what you have to do. I did contact another uh, police agency, and they were far more receptive. Um, they they actually took the steps and they found him and talked to him. But he knew how to play the game and denied everything. Um, you know, I still wonder and think, has he killed anybody? I hope he hasn't. Um, you know, and what's going on?
I'm changing the screen.
Okay. So, you know, I often wonder these things,
Mhm.
you know, and then if you know, I'll watch the news or something like that, you know, just to see. So it is forefront in my mind. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so it just, you know, that's I personally am very I've never been so disappointed in a police station, police department. I've never been more disappointed in um my ethical, you know, you're supposed to let me know what I need to do, you know, ethically. Where am I, you know, how much am I liable for?
Well, and that's the reason why I changed the screen without going through the wording, and I'm happy to share this with any of you. If we just look through the ACA Code of Ethics, the most recent one, and get a couple of definitions, when you look up confidentiality, consultation, counseling, distance counseling, professional relationship, and even things like suicide, homicide, and dangerousness, there are several different codes that show up just related to this case. And this is just cross-referencing your case, Dr. Nirenberg. So you're absolutely right. When you're saying you are the body that governs the ethics of my profession, how do I access you if something happens at 3 a.m? How do I access you if it happens on Saturday afternoon at 2? What do I do with this? And that was a big concern with this case. It wasn't that ACA wasn't available. They weren't available when they were called. So when she talked to a person that we both know who worked at the university where she got her doctorate at the time, that person who had worked with ACA previously in the ethics area said, oh no, this, you need to call the police right now, and then you need to contact ACA tomorrow. And when ACA was contacted, they had the whole, oh my gosh, this is important. We need to follow these steps. So they were quite responsive once they were reached. The question here is, what do you do when your client decides, or your client engages in behavior that is ethically concerning for you during a time that's not 9 to 5 or whatever times they happen to be open and operating those phones at ACA? And at the state board, they were also closed.
Yes, I also called New Jersey's. Yeah.
Licensure board, and
Yep.
there was another one. There was somebody else we tried to call. Oh, the liability insurance people.
Yeah. They were, yeah.
So what do you do? She's independently licensed. Gigi, are you independently licensed?
When you say, what do you mean by
Do
independently
you,
licensed?
is there a 1 level or 2 levels of licensure in Illinois?
So the way you're asking a question, it seems like there's two, because from your LPC, you go to a LCPC.
Okay, so there are 2 levels. Are you independently licensed? Do you have the highest level?
No,
Okay, so great. That means all of you guys are still under supervision.
supervision.
Yes, and Joshua, I don't know if you're licensed or not yet, but for those of you who are not licensed yet or not independently licensed, you are under supervision. That's awesome. So whenever anything like this happens, you consult your supervisors. Your supervisors should have great answers for what your next steps are. What if you are independently licensed? That's when things become a little different. What am I supposed to do with this? I don't have a supervisor anymore because I'm independently licensed. What might you do in that case? Any ideas?
When you say do about, can you specify when you say do about it? You mean as far as the client, what to do about this client?
What are your next steps, period? Because you have this client telling you suicidal, homicidal thoughts are going through their head. They have the option or the access to engaging in these activities. They might hurt somebody. And then they go, my bad. So do I call the police? Am I violating confidentiality? I don't want to put myself at risk, but I don't want to put the public at risk. What am I supposed to do with this?
But I thought we were clear that we found information based on the case study that he did indeed hurt someone in the past.
He did.
Yes.
But hurting
So-
somebody in the past doesn't necessarily give you permission to violate their confidentiality right now.
But I think in this case, because he
I like the face.
speaking
Mm-hmm.
on the phone and he actively said he's having homicidal, suicidal thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in a moving vehicle, it gives you the right to contact law enforcement to get him help. And also, I know in like Montgomery County, they have like a crisis team that's
Mhm,
the police department. Here in Prince George's County, we don't have that, but
Mm-hmm.
you can actively seek to get him help that way, because now you have to, like you said, because I wrote it down, you got to protect the public from and yourself from this person who is basically maybe seeking and he has a AR-15 available to him. You don't know if that's with him or not.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do something. But to speak, Dr. Nirenberg, I don't know. Like I remember having a similar, not this type of call, but I remember having calls for service where I get there, step out my cruiser, and by the time I get there, the suspect was saying all the right things, and there's nothing you can do as a law enforcement officer. I have to have probable cause to do anything, and that less, this is a person I've known before. So you can't, go ahead.
So okay, as a licensed doctor in the state of New Jersey, which is where he was at that moment, where I was able to get the law enforcement involved and all that to go find him. Okay, I told them that he needed to be involuntarily mandated to the hospital.
Oh, that's what's he's in Jersey. Okay.
Okay, so he's in Jersey. I'm in Jersey. I have jurisdiction in Jersey. And I said this to the law enforcement officer. Where they then called a crisis unit to come and evaluated him. Well, I've been evaluating this man for almost 2 days now. And I told you this. How would you feel about the crisis individual undermining your, professional Right.
Yeah, your professional opinion. Yeah.
Right. Your professional opinion, your
Assessment.
decision to independent to involuntarily commit him.
Right. They overrode your professional judgment.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And like I said, it wasn't just, yes, it was my choice, but I had the backing of what, four others,
Mhm.
four other doctors.
Yeah. So it sounds like that person, while they have a specialty, their specialty was not mental health. And
Yeah.
law enforcement and mental health are two different buckets.
Mhm.
So yes, they're looking at the way the law is written in New Jersey. Okay, that's fine. That's a little bit different than somebody's mental health and the assessment of dangerousness for this individual when it comes to all of the rest of us.
I want to speak to what Dr. Nirenberg said when you
Mhm.
mentioned how would you feel?
Right.
Mhm.
And I can relate to that. And it's disheartening as
Mhm.
professionals, because the reason why I got into the field is because I have a little brother with bipolar. And the same thing happened. Because I am, even though I'm not my brother's therapist, I am still a professional and I understand the behavior and I know when he's manic versus when he's normal. And we had him admitted because he was being aggressive and he was being violent, which can cause a problem at this point to anyone in our home. That includes our mother, my children, whomever. And I had a physician, after the crisis team came into the hospital, I had a physician say, they don't see anything. Well, one of the things that I learned about working with bipolar and schizophrenia, especially that head on because of my brother, is that there's moments where my brother can literally act normal. The
Yes.
same thing that this man did. He
Yes.
literally in front of the police was able to present normal and be released. And as soon as my brother was released, he came back to my unit at the time and tried to set us on fire in the house. What I then did, and I think this is something that I'm just learning from experience, and I don't know that there's an ACA, because we know the ACA code of ethics, even APA, when it comes to these different things, have ambiguity. So it's not clear on when specific situations arise. But I literally had to go to the hospital and ask for the head administrator, argue my case, give examples, show video, and all of this to get them to side with me. Because maybe they and maybe it's the idea of when you're in that ER room and it's a crisis, this person is saying, well, this is what I see. I don't see anything extreme. Yeah, but I've been my brother's sister all 30 years of his life, and I know the difference than you know for today.
Right.
And it's disheartening when, as professionals, when the medical team has to come in, it's almost like we're being discredited as if we're not trained and understand what we're seeing that's before us.
Mhm.
So in my mind, in totality, I think what's important is to escalate it to whatever point you can. And when I was thinking about, if it was me, if I were in your shoes, I would be talking to an attorney. I would be talking to, if that police station captured him and didn't see it, because some police aren't, they say that police are trained on CT, but not to the extreme, that not to the capacity that we understand behavior as licensed professional counselors. So what I think is a rule of thumb is to go through some more chains of command and steps, because I went as far to go talk to the whole hospital administrator, because in my mind, I have to not only protect myself and my family, but I love my brother. I want to protect him too. And I know that he needs the help. And I feel the same way about this client. He needs help. He is most likely out there harming other people. Of course, we hope not, but that's not the world we live in.
Right.
So I wouldn't sit on it another day if it was me, because I will be concerned about my safety, the safety of the public, as well as his own safety, even the safety of his wife. Because who's to say that when he's episodic, because it sounds like some level of psychopathology, it could be schizophrenia, whatever, it's extreme, we know that it's severe, why would I chance that?
Right.
So for me, I would be constantly escalating, making sure I'm in a safe space until this person is arrested and receiving the help that he needs. I tell my clients that up front. I'm letting you know when we first meet, that if you are a harm to yourself or others, I will have you admitted. You can hate me later, but if it's for your well-being and the well-being of all of those around me. So that's the way I feel about it. And I'm sure that came out very compassionate because I'm relating because this has been the story of my life, but we cannot dictate. There was a personal friend of mine's, someone got out of jail. The son was released out of jail. This is not a client of mine, but I just know the case story. Was released out of jail. He had to be sent to his grandparents' house because no one else could allow this person in on electric monitoring. And he woke up one day and killed both of the grandparents. I'm doing a good deed by allowing my grandchild in, but he was just incarcerated, coming home manic, and he has an episode and both grandparents are dead. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't hold up my husband works for the county, he has for 20 years. It does not hold up in the court of law because they're going to say, oh, well, this person has a mental instability and they're no good in court to blah, blah, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. So I feel like as professionals, if we have to go above and beyond to make sure this person, even if that means this person is incarcerated, to get the help that they need, then we need to do so. I can't imagine myself sitting on something like that.
Oh, thank you, Gigi. I appreciate that a lot. And I also appreciate that you were able to share with us some of your background, and the same to you, Shani, with some of your professional background. Samantha and Joshua, is there anything either of you want to add? I want to make sure there's space for you too.
Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. I'm only a student, and I'm just trying to put everything together. And then I didn't want to jump in because it sounds like I came a little bit late to the party.
I'm glad you came to the party. We were talking about a case in which Dr. Nirenberg worked with a client, a telebehavioral health client, new person, and he disclosed in that first conversation that he had suicidal, homicidal thoughts, had a history of having engaged in some legal he killed someone previously, he maimed someone previously, was paralyzed, and there were some other legal issues. She was able, because she's a former police officer, to talk to him in a way that allowed her to elicit information. So she had information about his physical appearance, I took some notes, military history, his access to weapons, that he was an interstate truck driver, and that he was actually in the truck, his family constellation, and what we were talking about is the ethics involved in contacting the police and consulting with others, because the New Jersey licensure board was closed. This was a Sunday evening. ACA's hotline was not operating, and the liability insurance company's hotline was not operating. So what do you do when you're in this position, especially when you're independently licensed and you can't call your supervisor because you no longer are under supervision?
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff wasn't in the description of what the topic was going to be about, but I did have the general idea, like, hey, what do you do when at 3 o'clock in the morning? And then I did have, I guess, a question about what Gigi was saying, because I was really trying to process what you were saying and what little information I had. What do you do? Because you were talking about that. I don't know if you said he was a client or whoever went to his grandparents' house and ended up killing him. Like, what do you do, like, when you know that that person has the capability and they're about to be released from prison? I don't know what options I would have. I mean, I'm only a student. I don't have a lot of experience with it. And I'm wondering, like, oh my God, what would I do?
You know, it's very interesting today, because just coincidentally, I was watching an episode of Dateline NBC. I think it was aired 2 weeks ago, about a case that took place in Washington and in Utah, where this man named Josh, I can't think of his last name. He killed his wife, never found her. He had 2 sons. The state of Washington took custody of his sons. He was really disappointed, really distressed. He moved in with his dad. His father had some weird obsession with the son's wife, so with his daughter-in-law. On a supervised visitation, the social worker took the boys to the front door. The boys run through the door. Josh slams the door, doesn't let the social worker in. She calls 911 and tells him, I'm concerned. This is a supervised visitation for a parent who just lost custody of his kids. I think he might hurt them. And he heard the father saying, I've got a surprise for you for the sons. She's really freaking out. And the police officer's going, has he threatened his son's life? No, but this is this person and his wife's missing and we think he killed her. But has he threatened his son's life? No, I'll send a car as soon as we have one. No, I'm telling you, this is scary. I need your help. We'll send a car when we can. Then you see the explosion. The house goes up. He had taken a hatchet and killed both boys, or hit both boys. put gasoline on them, sat on another gas can, set the house on fire, blew it up while the social workers kind of standing there watching all this happen. And this happened, I think in 2012 was when that last piece happened, and the family just won a lawsuit against the state of Washington because Children's Services did actually follow their own procedures. The procedures were just kind of crappy. And so no individual person was named. The state of Washington Children's Services was sued, and the state of Washington itself, because they hold children's services, were sued. So in this case, this person did all that they could do. She did everything that she legally could do as a social worker with a phone. What else can I do? I can't like charge through the door, because she said if I could have gone in there, I would have. So he probably really spared her life by slamming the door. He knew what he was going to do. Sometimes we don't know what to do. We call law enforcement. If they follow the procedures as written, it doesn't give us the protection that we want, because laws, as Gigi noted, are ambiguously written in some cases. So are ethical codes, so that you can have some level of interpretation. And that dispatcher who got that call interpreted the law in such a way where he didn't need to send anybody immediately, didn't. And this catastrophe took place. We do the best we can under supervision. The first person you want to call, unless you have to call 911 because it's happening right now, the first person you want to call is your supervisor. If somebody's actively being harmed, of course, you call 911 and then you call your supervisor. Because there is no perfect document that gives you every possible scenario and how to resolve it perfectly. And that's where we get stuck. We want things to turn out where people are alive, where people are healthy, where people thrive. But sometimes we run into people with certain types of mental health issues, or people who are antisocial, who have no interest in complying with what we request. And that's where it gets sticky.
The gentleman that I was dealing with, he admitted, he said he was diagnosed as antisocial. And he made several references to where he does not like people. He does not want people around him. The CIA has contacted him, just things that were way off the wall.
Schizophrenia as well.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
CIA. Yeah.
Yeah. So there were a lot of red flags flying right in front of my face during this whole thing. And I think the worst thing was how helpless I felt. If I could have crawled through that phone, I would have crawled through that phone. I was depending on law enforcement, because I know that when I was a deputy, it seemed like when I was on this one shift, every person with mental health was in crisis when I was on this one shift. And and for some reason I got every single call, so I had a lot of experience with mental health individuals as a law enforcement officer. I knew how to treat them. Shawnee, I noticed that when they were saying, law enforcement is trained in this. You and I are both near shaking our head no. They are starting to send law enforcement to specific classes to teach them how to deal with mental health individuals. However, with that being said, there's also the stigma, the bias, the fact that law enforcement does not believe in mental health therapy. So their view, if Johnny is coming at me and mom is right behind him running, saying he has this mental health issue, he's not armed, and Johnny's coming at them, they're going to shoot.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that mom is saying that he has this mental health issue or that mental health issue. At that point, it is in the officer's state of mind, it is their life on the line.
Right.
I think that depends on the state, because the state of Illinois, our state, we actually do have the CPD has mental health training. Again, because I have a brother that I've dealt with over the years, I can shoot a call to 911 and clarify. That's the important piece. Informing. I have to be very specific when I call. Right off the top of my head, I can't think of the code, but there's a code that I can say, this is a mental health crisis. So when the police show up, they are aware. While there may be some level of danger, this is a specific special case that you must treat as a mental health case, because they can be sued. Another thing that I'm hearing that's supposed to happen in the state of Illinois, and I think this is also because of the excessive crime that has been happening in the city of Chicago, is that they're supposed to start hiring. Don't know how true it is. Law hasn't been passed, but they're supposed to, with our CPD, starting to have to every 2 cops to a car and 1 mental health professional ride with them, which I think is ideal. It would definitely create some job and some financial stability, because our police department makes great money, and they are also trained and they have mental health backing for law enforcement as well. And that's in the state of Illinois. However, right up over us in Minnesota, because my brother moved from the state of Illinois to Minnesota, so different. If you are incarcerated as with mental health in the state of Illinois, in our jails, you automatically go to the mental health wing. In Minnesota, when my little brother was locked up, because I have his power of attorney, and I got the call, I literally had to send a letter, an email, paperwork stating that I have his power of attorney to have him medicated. So from state to state, it looks different with law enforcement and how they handle their mental health issues.
Yeah, definitely. You're definitely right. It's yeah. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're totally right on that. Will we ever get a commonality? I don't think so. Because the South handles it one way, the North handles it one way. Like you were saying, this state handles it, that state. It's also different from county to county.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's different from agency to agency, until we all get on the same page. And I think until law enforcement starts to trust mental health and realize that we are there to help them, uh we're not going to see it. um yeah, because I mean, I was a supervisor in Georgia, and I had sent and I so didn't want to send this guy out to this case, because he didn't even have like mental health background. His background literally was in IT, but my boss made me hire him. So I sent him out to this house, knowing that this guy has potential for violence. And when he got there, the guy had a box of razor blades, and the razor blade, one to his wrist. And I got a phone call. Well, I was in training that day, and I left training because I was the only licensed person and the only individual who was able to make the call to go ahead and let's get the ball moving and get him into hospital. So I left training, got there. My guy did a wonderful job, talked him out of the razor blades and everything like that. But when I called law enforcement, they also they knew him. It was a small town, so they knew him. So we were able to get him the help. Between me and law enforcement, we were able to talk him into the car. to say the least, I was not backed. I got in trouble for leaving training, but that's my employee. I'm not going to leave him hanging. You know, I'll take the write up. Go ahead, fire me, whatever you got to do. My guy's alive. You know, so yeah, that's my whole mentality kind of thing. So, but you know, we got him the help he needed, and that was important.
Well, we're gonna wrap up in just a second. You brought up something that I think is really interesting. A little while ago, a colleague of mine called me and said, I'm in the middle of a crisis. This was after yours, Dr. Nirenberg. I'm in the middle of a crisis and I need some help. I have this person whose father just called me and said that his son is actively robbing a house right now. The Shaker Heights police have surrounded the house. The man is inside and his father wants me to call the police and tell them he's a client under my care so that they won't shoot him. Should I do it? And my initial response was no, because you don't have that client's permission to disclose this information. I understand you want to do well and you want to protect him, but you can't do that because then you put yourself in the position where you might be sued. So I told her, this is what you do. I'm going to tell you no, but I'm going to call the board for you and see what they say. The answer is no, you cannot violate the confidentiality. But what she did tell him is, you can tell them anything you want to tell them. As his father, you can say whatever you want to say. And we have to be really careful. We want to protect the public. We want to protect our clients. We want to protect ourselves. But there are ethical codes that are written in such a way where we have to know how much wiggle room we have,
right,
or we start choosing how we want to engage these things, unless we want to get ourselves in trouble. I see thoughts, Joshua. You're muted though. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So on that question, so I guess when you talk about the confidentiality and, so in that particular scenario, you can't tell the police that he's a client because that breaks the confidentiality. However, had that client told the counselor, I'm going to rob a house, isn't the counselor obligated to report it to the police?
I would say actually in that case, probably no. What I would do in that case is call the board. If he said, I'm going to go kill Bob, yeah, because you're protecting Bob. I'm going to go rob a house. Who are you protecting? The homeowner's property, perhaps. But there's nobody's physical safety threatened. So what I would do, and this is what I do all the time, I live in Ontario and in Ohio. In Columbus, they probably have a special line for me because I'll call and ask a question about anything. Call and find out, is this reportable? Is this something I have to report? Because if you report something that is not reportable, that person can actually come after you. You may have violated their confidentiality. But if it's somebody's physical safety, or if there's child or elder abuse involved, yeah, I know that I can call and report that. But you're going to break into a house or a car, I'm going to call and double check and let the state tell me what.
Because I'm aware, like if someone threatens violence or hurt someone else, it's clear cut, no questions about it. But let's say Nicolas Cage walks into your office and says, I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence. You can't tell. You're like, okay,
probably not. Right. What I would do is be on the phone in Columbus going, hey, I've got this interesting case. A person just came and told me they're planning to steal the Declaration of Independence. And they actually have the means to do it. I don't think this is a person just talking. What are my next steps? I very strongly suspect there would.
So contact ACA, okay.
Well, I'll contact the state of Columbus. State of Ohio Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Family Therapy Board. And then in my case, I contact the psych board as well, because I have 2 licenses. I contact those people who govern my license to say, what do I do here? Because they have ethics people and legal people on staff to help you with those types of questions. I'm not a lawyer.
In my case, I was lucky because he gave me permission to speak to his sister, but told me not to call his wife. However, he did give me his wife's name and phone number. But he specifically said, do not call my wife. You can call my sister. I was on the phone real quick with that sister.
And there's no limitation. Like once you called the sister and told her everything was going on, she's not like, I guess you're not obligated to try and coerce her into not telling anybody.
Right. No.
No, not at all.
And you can even say, You can tell whoever you want, sister. Here's the wife's phone number that he just gave me, and you can do with that what you want.
Well, I probably wouldn't say it that way, but she could interpret it however she wanted to interpret it.
Right.
She has no confidentiality agreement with the
Right.
brother. So once the brother released that information to be released to his sister, we can't control what the sister does with it.
Right.
Kind of like that other therapist telling the father, I can't tell the police anything. You can tell the police what you believe you need to tell them. That was what they handled. And in that case, thank goodness, there was no physical harm done to anyone. They were able to apprehend him, arrest him without any kind of injury or harm. But when we have that kind of relationship, maybe we'll cover that more at a different Trust the Process too. We have to know how to seek help and still try to juggle all these different balls of protection that we have. I want to walk away from this. I want the client to walk away from this. I want the officers to everybody to walk away from this.
I wanted to hang up the phone.
I'm sure you did want to hang up the phone.
Yeah.
I wanted to hang up the phone and I was only a consultant. This was such an interesting case because while I'm talking, I happened to look behind me. I was in Ohio at the time and my mother was completely mesmerized by everything going on and she could only hear my parts. It was a big deal case where you have this person who might actively be out there hurting people. You know, serial killer came up a couple of times. That's scary stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the serial killer wasn't only my thought and idea; it was yours. It was the dispatcher immediately, the one that I spoke to. She went straight there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was based on what he was saying.
Exactly.
See, thoughts on Gigi's mind too, and this will be our last one, so I can let you guys.
I have a
go.
question that I'm not putting the pieces together. Red flag, serial killer. Okay.
Yes.
Which means while we cannot prove that he's in harm to himself,
correct.
According to ACA, we can prove that he has been a harm to others. Why are we not informing the wife one more time?
He did not allow me. It was his choice. You could speak to my sister. You cannot speak to my wife.
And did you keep in mind?
How does he have confidentiality privilege once he has breached by being a serial killer?
See, we don't know.
We don't know.
We know that he killed somebody in the past. And we know he went through the legal system for that.
Right. And if he was to say that he was going to hurt his wife or his kids, we'd have duty to warn.
Right.
But because he didn't bring that up, we did not have duty to warn his wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm in the wrong field.
I don't think you're in the wrong field, but here's the thing.
Okay, let me ask it this way.
Okay.
How can we, because you know how I am, Dr. TRW, tell me what board that I need to be on with ACA, whatever state, so that the next time it's time to rehash these ACA code of ethics or whatever we need, we can change that.
But realize that's not the ethics, that's the law we're talking about.
Yes.
And the ethics are always underneath the law. Law wins always. I would rather do something unethical than something illegal. Illegal can take away your freedom. Unethical can take away your license. But the law does not allow you to do this. And neither does the ethical code either. If I kill somebody, and I have not, if I kill somebody in 2020, that does not mean I'm going to kill somebody in 2025.
But you got the potential to.
We all have the potential, arguably. But yes, I've shown that I've done it in the past, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to always do it.
All right.
So when somebody goes through the legal system, they've been acquitted, they've been convicted and paid their dues, whatever, that case has happened. It does not mean that every time something else happens, it's that person. If I'm convicted of theft, if something goes missing in your house, it doesn't mean I did it, even if I live next door.
Yeah, but he told her again, even though he tried to go backwards, because once, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, he said, if you have a history, and now I'm going to look at it as substance abuse, right? Because I did a CADC. Now some people, place, or thing has triggered this behavior in you again.
It's possible, yes.
And he stated to Dr. Nirenberg, hey, I'm feeling that itch again. I think I want to go kill me some people. It's stated.
Now, I think there was one thing I left. He said he daily had thoughts of suicide and daily had thoughts of homicide.
What happened?
So
It's got
yes,
to be too
it
much.
was. She was like, she blew up.
She disappeared. Well, here's the one thing I wanted. I do need to share this with all of you before. If any of you happens to be in practicum or internship, this does count as an hour for you, a little bit more than an hour for you. So make sure you count that. I did just make sure I double checked it with the field office just to make sure. So this counts as an hour. I hope that she pops back in, or I'll send her a message to let her know that it counts as an hour for her. She's an intern. She just, I guess,
blew
couldn't
up.
take it anymore. All right, so I don't really have anything else. I don't want to hold you longer because we can continue to talk about this. But if this is an interest of yours, please let me know. We can revisit this topic in one of the future Trust the Processes.
No, this is a good case. This is a good, great scenario.
Thank you.
But it does. I do.
It
see
wasn't at the time.
Huh?
It wasn't at the time.
I know. I would have never want that to happen. I do see where there's a need for training on law enforcement side. Really, whether it's a paperwork or something where a doctor could like sign something or give a verbal consent, something that says, you know what, I am initiating this emergency petition. So it covers the officers responding, so they would make that lockup.
Well, to tell you the truth, I was very, very irritated with the crisis worker. Very irritated with the crisis worker. To the point where if I had that crisis worker's name, I probably would have called a supervisor. Because who were they to I was very, very irritated with the crisis worker.
I'm sure. It's a sticky situation to be in when you're trying to help and you're not getting the help.
She goes, we thought
Glad
you
you're
blew
back.
up.
I think I got too excited. It was getting juicy. It was like looking at a good movie, and I got too excited.
Well, the only thing we talked about how this is an hour for field if you are a field experience student. So please be sure to count that. All right. So, and we also said that because this conversation seems to have your interest, we may have a part 2 and continue this conversation. Maybe even in that case, we can invite maybe an attorney. I'll have to think about if we can find somebody.
Or ACA or a former
Somebody
ACA.
Dr. Shapiris, is that who you're
Yes.
thinking of? Yeah,
Yes.
she is the person we consulted. I'll see if she's available too.
Yeah.
And maybe
She
we
was-
can actually
she
have
was-
more of a conversation.
She was great. She called me and you know, knowing her and all, it helped a lot for me because I knew her. But she made sure I knew that I did everything I possibly could.
Yeah.
And then that's one of the things that's nice to know, nice to hear, because you're in your mind. And Sean, you guys were talking about how do I, you protect yourself because you're in your mind and you're like you're playing the what if game, and to hear it, not just a colleague but a colleague you trust tell you that you've done everything you possibly could, it helps a lot.
Yeah, it does. All right, Gigi, I hope you're okay.
And I need self-care after this.
And I do appreciate all of you coming, Samantha and Gigi, Shani, Joshua, and thank you, Dr. Nirenberg. We will do this once a month, probably not January. The first weekend in January is New Year's, so that is a little inconsistent. So February, there's an eating disorder person speaking to us. March, we're going to do something on actually DNA. I had a case, and so did Dr. Foster, of a person who found out that their parents weren't really their parents after doing an ancestry DNA search just out of curiosity. So how do we as clinicians handle that when that shows up in your office? In fact, for me, the mother was the one who called and said, we need to see you in person today. But we were able to make that work because her children were able to find out that she was not the biological mother, carried the pregnancies, but they used an egg donor and hadn't
Oh.
told the kids. And Dr. Foster had a case that was kind of similar. So she's got a little bit of a legal background with this. So she's going to speak to us in March. And then I'll let you know the schedule after March. We also are looking to have somebody speak to us about QAnon. Are you familiar with them? Yeah. About how, as counselors, we handle QAnon. That was the whole, during the election, there was like this scandal called Pizzagate, and there was some idea that they were, so QAnon is one of the groups behind that. So
my nephew was very affected by that. He developed some type of severe anxiety. He was like yelling at the closet, and it turns out he was obsessed with the whole child sex trafficking.
Yes.
And he was like, he got lost in it. And
that's why we think this is important for counselors to be aware of too, because the people who have been connected to this have exhibited such strong anxiety and strong belief and think that they're helping with a cause, and there's a whole lot of fallout. So we need to be aware that these things are happening, because these clients may come into our virtual or in-person physical offices. So that's up through hopefully April, and then as we have more topics, I will let you know. All right. Thank you guys for spending some time with me on a Saturday.
No,
Yeah,
thank
right.
you.
Welcome.
Take
good
care.
topics.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye. The recording, here we go.